Welcome back to Reddit Revenge. Today's story is one you won't forget. You know how sometimes you move into a new neighborhood and you think, great, we'll finally have some friendly neighbors we can hang out with? Well, when my wife and I moved to upstate New York years ago, that's exactly how it felt at first. Across the road lived an older couple, Joey and Linda. They were maybe a dozen years older than us, but seemed pleasant enough. Joey liked to chat outside whenever I was in the yard, and Linda always waved with a big smile. After a few casual conversations, they suggested we all go out to dinner together sometime. My wife and I figured, why not? We hadn't really been social with the neighborhood yet, and it felt like the right thing to do. What harm could one dinner do, right? Spoiler, a lot more than we expected. That one innocent neighborly dinner would turn into a running game of manipulation, freeloading, and eventually one of the pettiest but most satisfying acts of revenge I've ever pulled off in my life. The first dinner happened on a Friday night. My wife and I came straight from work, still in our office clothes, and met Joey and Linda at this Italian place he wouldn't stop raving about. My wife isn't much of a drinker, and I usually avoid alcohol if I'm driving, so we ordered light, just mains and one appetizer to share. Joey and Linda, on the other hand, went all in. Cocktails before the meal, appetizers for each of them, then big entrees, and finally, of course, dessert. By the time the waiter dropped off the check, it was obvious where this was going. Joey pushed the bill toward me with a grin and said something like, "Easiest way is just to split it down the middle." My stomach sank. Their half was stacked with drinks, sides, and extras we never touched. But in the moment we didn't want to look cheap or start a fight. So we paid. And not only did they insist on paying exactly half of the food bill, they also lowballed the tip, which left us quietly covering the difference. It wasn't the money so much as the principle, that sinking realization that we'd just been played. Walking out of that restaurant, I told my wife, next time, we're keeping a closer eye on that check. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a much bigger game. A couple of weeks later, Joey suggested another outing. This time it was a scenic spot along the Hudson River. My wife and I already knew what to expect, a repeat of the half-the-bill scam. On the way over, I decided to be proactive. When we arrived, I pulled Joey aside before we even sat down and said, "Look, my wife and I don't eat or drink as much as you two. It's only fair if we just pay for what we order." He looked at me like I just insulted him personally, his eyebrows pulling together in this confused glare. For a second, I thought he might actually argue, but he muttered something like, "Yeah, sure, whatever," clearly not thrilled. Dinner went a little smoother this time. We ordered light again while they still indulged, though I noticed Joey kept giving me these side glances, like he was annoyed I'd broken the unspoken deal. When the check came, there was still a bit of back and forth, and in the end, my wife gave in a little just to avoid a scene. We ended up paying closer to half anyway, plus making sure the tip was covered properly. As we left, my wife sighed and said, "This is getting ridiculous." She was right, and I realized that Joey wasn't going to stop trying to get a discount dinner at our expense. If anything, he seemed even more determined the next time. Not long after, Joey decided to up the stakes. This time he suggested the Chart House, and anyone familiar knows it's not exactly a budget-friendly place. My wife and I exchanged a look. We both knew what this meant. If they were pulling their stunt at modest local spots, then at a high-end restaurant, the split-the-bill trick could turn into a small financial disaster for us. We went anyway, partly out of curiosity, partly because we didn't want to seem unfriendly. Dinner started with Joey ordering a cocktail the size of a small fishbowl, while Linda went straight for appetizers that could have fed a family of 4. My wife and I stuck to water and modest entrees, but the entire evening I felt this heavy sense of déjà vu. When the check finally landed, Joey did his usual routine, calculating exactly half, pretending as if that was fair. My wife, always trying to avoid conflict, gave in again, and once more we ended up covering more than our share. On the drive home, she said, "It's not about the money, it's about the principle. They're using us." She was absolutely right. And right then, a seed was planted. I wasn't going to argue at the table next time. I wasn't going to let Joey bully us into splitting anything. Next time, I'd make sure the bill told the story all on its own. By the time Joey invited us out again, I had already made up my mind. This wasn't just about saving a few bucks anymore, it was about respect. Every dinner was a performance where they played the role of generous hosts while secretly draining our wallets. And honestly, I was tired of being the supporting actor in their little scheme. So when Joey called and said, "Hey, there's this amazing upscale spot we've got to try," I smiled into the phone and agreed immediately. But in my head, I was already planning my counterattack. My wife, cautious as ever, asked me in the car, "Are we really going? You know what's going to happen." I told her to trust me. Tonight, things are going to be different. I spent the day rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd time it, even how I'd keep a straight face. But when the moment came, I realized I didn't need speeches or arguments. I just needed one tiny adjustment that would flip the script entirely. See, Joey loved making a spectacle at dinner, ordering the biggest plates, the fanciest drinks, piling on dessert as if calories didn't exist. And I decided to let him have his fun. But what he didn't know was that I'd already had a quiet word with the waiter before the first appetizer ever hit the table. Dinner began just like all the others. Joey was in his element, laughing too loud, calling the waiter buddy, like they were old friends, and making a grand show of scanning the menu. Linda followed his lead, ordering cocktails with names I couldn't even pronounce, then appetizers for the table that somehow never seemed to reach our side. My wife and I kept it simple, one entree each, no drinks, no fuss. Joey shot me a look, half mocking, half pitying, as if to say, "Come on, live a little." But I just smiled back, sipping my water, because I knew what was coming. Course after course rolled out. Joey devoured steak, lobster, pasta. The man acted like it was his last meal on earth. Linda, not to be outdone, matched him bite for bite, each round paired with another overpriced cocktail. All the while, my wife and I quietly enjoyed our modest plates, watching the spectacle unfold. And then came the moment. Joey leaned back in his chair, rubbing his belly, clearly preparing for the grand finale. The check. He always loved this part. The smug smile, the faux generosity, the inevitable push towards splitting evenly. But this time, when the waiter arrived, something was different. He didn't place one folder on the table. He placed two. One in front of us, one in front of them, and the look on Joey's face, worth every single penny. For a second, Joey didn't even process it. He stared at the two check folders like they were some kind of puzzle, waiting for me to explain. Then, with that trademark forced laugh of his, he said, "Oh, must be a mistake. Bring us just one bill." But the waiter, bless his heart, shook his head politely. "No, sir. The gentleman asked ahead of time to keep the checks separate." I swear Joey's face turned 3 shades of red at once. Linda blinked, confused, then leaned over to peek at their bill. And that's when the real horror set in. Their total was easily twice ours, maybe more once the drinks and desserts were tallied. Meanwhile, our neat little check sat quietly in front of me, a fraction of the damage. Joey's smile evaporated. He tried to joke, to make it seem casual, but his voice cracked as he muttered, "Well, I suppose we'll just handle this one then." Linda's lips tightened, like she'd just bitten into a lemon, and I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing out loud. My wife, cool as ever, simply slid our card into our folder and handed it back without a word. It was the cleanest checkmate I'd ever played, and Joey knew it. Joey's expression in that moment was something I'll never forget. His forced grin collapsed into a scowl so sharp it could have cut glass. He gripped the leather bill folder like it was a personal insult, his knuckles whitening as he flipped it open again, almost as if rereading the numbers would magically change them. But no, there they were in all their glory. A mountain of cocktails, overpriced appetizers, extravagant mains, and desserts stacked up like trophies of gluttony. Meanwhile, Linda sat frozen, her fork still resting on her dessert plate. Her eyes darted from their bloated check to our modest one, then back to Joey, as if silently begging him to do something, anything, that would save face. But Joey wasn't the quick-witted type. He was the type who thrived when he had control of the situation, when he could guilt others into picking up the slack. Now, stripped of that advantage, he looked like a schoolboy caught cheating on a test. I could practically feel the tension radiating from across the table, and honestly, it was delicious. My wife remained composed, offering nothing but a polite smile as she sipped her water. She knew exactly what I'd done and, judging by the sparkle in her eyes, she was enjoying every second of it. When the waiter returned to collect the folders, Joey cleared his throat, fumbling with his wallet. His hands trembled slightly as he slid his card inside, avoiding eye contact with me. I, on the other hand, leaned back in my chair with the ease of a man who had just played his winning move. For years, Joey had been running this scam, bleeding neighbors dry one dinner at a time. But tonight, he was paying the full price of his own indulgence, and he knew it. The silence at the table stretched on, broken only by the faint clink of cutlery and the low hum of conversations from nearby diners. Joey was still glaring at the bill as though sheer willpower might shrink the numbers staring back at him. His face had turned the color of overripe tomatoes, and a thin bead of sweat trickled down his temple. Linda, for her part, tried to smooth things over with nervous small talk, complimenting the dessert and laughing a little too loudly at nothing in particular. But her laughter died quickly when she realized Joey wasn't joining in. Across from them, my wife and I sat in absolute calm. She reached over, touched my hand lightly under the table, and gave me the tiniest nod of approval. It was her way of saying, "You did it. You finally turned the tables." That moment was better than any sweet dessert they could have ordered. When the checks were finally settled, Joey slapped his card on the table with an almost violent motion, muttering something about never splitting hairs over money. The irony wasn't lost on me. He had spent months nickel-and-diming us, dragging us into overpriced meals where we covered his excesses. Now he was the one caught in his own trap, paying for every last drop of wine and every extra appetizer he thought he was slick enough to push onto us. As the waiter whisked away the folders, I caught Joey's eye. I didn't say a word, but the smug calm on my face was enough. That was the sweetest revenge. No raised voice, no dramatic confrontation, just pure, quiet satisfaction. Joey knew he'd been beaten at his own game, and there wasn't a thing he could do about it. Walking out of the restaurant that night, the air felt different, lighter, sharper, filled with the kind of triumph you don't often get in life. I didn't just dodge a scam. I had turned the scam back on the scammer, and the taste of victory was better than anything on the menu. The following weeks were strangely quiet. Joey and Linda, usually the kind of neighbors who waved eagerly from across the street or found excuses to linger in conversation, seemed to vanish into their own little world. I'd catch glimpses of them, Joey mowing the lawn with his jaw set tight, Linda shuffling groceries into the house without her usual cheerful chatter, but they no longer sought us out. It was as though the great dinner debacle had left an invisible line drawn down the middle of the road, and neither of them dared cross it. At first, I thought that was the end of it. Problem solved. They'd been exposed for the moochers they were, and now they were nursing their bruised egos in silence. But of course, Joey wasn't the type to let things go quietly. He still carried himself with that self-important air, the kind of man who thought the world owed him little indulgences. And though he never brought up the restaurant incident directly, I could feel the tension simmering just beneath the surface every time we made eye contact. Then, one sunny Saturday, Joey wandered over while I was trimming the hedges. He forced a smile and started talking about the weather, about the Yankees, about anything but the obvious elephant in the room. Finally, after a few awkward minutes, he dropped his casual little suggestion. "We should do dinner again sometime, you know. Keep up the tradition." I almost laughed out loud. The tradition? If by tradition he meant us footing the bill for his four-course feasts, then yes, I knew exactly what he was after. But I played it cool, nodding politely, telling him we'd see what our schedules look like. The truth was, I had no intention of ever letting him corner us into that trap again. Still, something about his persistence told me this wasn't over yet. Joey wasn't just a neighbor with expensive taste. He was a man who hated losing. And losing to me had burned deeper than he wanted to admit. It didn't take long for Joey's casual suggestion to morph into a full-blown plan. A week later, Linda stopped my wife at the mailbox, all smiles as though nothing awkward had ever happened, and chirped, "We're heading to this new steakhouse on the river next weekend. You two have to come." Joey already made the reservation. It was classic Joey. Put everything in motion first, then present it as a done deal, leaving us with the choice of looking rude if we declined. My wife and I exchanged that silent married look, the one where an entire conversation happens in a single raised eyebrow. We both knew what this was. Joey wasn't inviting us for friendship. He was trying to reset the game, erase the sting of that separate check fiasco, and pull us right back into his little scheme. But this time, we weren't walking in blind. We talked it over that night and decided if we did go, we'd be ready. No more split the bill evenly. No more covering his double martinis and chocolate lava cakes. If Joey thought he could sucker us again, he was in for another surprise. So when the night came, we arrived cool and collected, already planning to order modestly. My wife even suggested we share a single entree. It wasn't about being cheap, it was about sending a message. The waiter approached. Joey and Linda dove into the menu with their usual enthusiasm, rattling off orders for cocktails, shrimp cocktails, steaks the size of footballs, and of course, one of every dessert to try. I almost had to admire the audacity. They were going all in, betting that we'd cave once the check landed. Joey even leaned back smugly during dinner, cracking jokes about old times like he was already savoring the free ride. But what he didn't know was that I'd already spoken to the manager when we walked in. Our check, once again, would be separate. And this time, I was ready to watch the fireworks. When the meal finally wound down, Joey waved his hand dramatically and said, "Check, please." Like he was the host of the evening. You could practically see the anticipation in his eyes. He thought we were about to split his mountain of excess like we had so many times before. Then the waiter arrived, with 2 checks. One placed neatly in front of Joey and Linda, the other in front of us. My wife and I casually glanced at ours. It was modest, just as we expected, and slid in our card without hesitation. But across the table? Oh, the silence was deafening. Joey's smirk froze halfway, his face turning the color of marinara sauce. He opened the leather folder, and I swear you could see the steam rising off his head. Their total was more than double ours. Linda gave him a wide-eyed look, like now what? While Joey's jaw tightened. He tried to joke it off, muttering something about, "Guess we went a little overboard." But the fury in his eyes betrayed him. He knew exactly what had happened. We had flipped his little scam on its head. We paid our bill quickly and politely thanked the waiter, leaving Joey to stew in his own overpriced feast. Walking out of the restaurant, my wife squeezed my hand and whispered, "Best money we've ever spent." After that night, the dinner invitations slowed, then stopped altogether. Joey had lost his free ride, and he knew it. The next time he tried to bait us into a meal, we couldn't make it. And eventually, the pattern broke for good. And that was the sweetest revenge of all. Not shouting, not fighting, not drama. Just calmly letting someone trap themselves in their own greed while we walked away smiling. Because sometimes the best dish served at dinner is justice.